Thanks so much for having me. Super excited about talking about Oakdale, right? Like, if you've been following the news since Microsoft Ignite a couple of weeks ago, like you probably saw some of the name changes. Like, what is this thing called DataFlex? What is Oakdale? It's built on this thing called the CDS, Common Data Service. What the heck is that, right? So no worries if you're at the stage, we're gonna try to peel the onion a little bit and extrapolate what's going on. Just in case I don't know who you are, we don't know each other. My name is Bobby Chang. I'm a technology specialist with Microsoft Federal. So I work with a lot of federal civilian government agencies. I've been doing community work, graduated from the SharePoint world, still very much love the SharePoint community. So I do mean it wholeheartedly. If you have any questions at all, I want to connect, would love to connect with you. Here's my contact on the left-hand side. I'm local to the DC area. I live out in Maryland. So, again, if and when we get out of this COVID thing, hope and looking forward to meet you in person, hopefully in an actual in-person user group. Let's go ahead and actually start to talk about Oakdale, right? And most of us are Power Platform geek here, so no need to dive in what this Power BI versus Power Apps or Power Automate, right? We know when we talk about Power Platform, it's really dashboarding, mobile application development, workflow automation, right? All those components are provided inside the Power Platform. And part of the awesome story is the data connector piece to that, right? Like that we could connect ourselves to whether that's a SharePoint conversation in the SharePoint Online world or the Teams, right? Anything inside of Office 365, inside of on-premise technology, whether that's a SQL or SharePoint on-premises story, right? Even in Azure, or even in our non-Microsoft cloud world, whether that's SAP, Oracle, you name it, right? Even adding the custom connector story, which I know April knows a lot about. If you're curious about custom connector, definitely want to reach out to April, who's done a lot of good work around here. But it's almost limitless in terms of what you can do here. And what you'll hear today, if you don't know too much about RPA and the UI flow components inside of Power Automate, that allows you to then even go a little bit more of what you can provide inside of the data connector piece of being able to record repetitive actions through like old legacy applications, right? So with all of that in mind, the limit is pretty high. The ceiling is pretty high in terms of what you can do inside of Power Platform. So how does CDS come into the picture, right? Because when we talked about Common Data Service or CDS, it's sort of like the less sexy part of Power Platform. So how does that play into what we're talking about in the Power Platform offering? So that's where we kind of want to focus in today, right? And why you should care about Project Oakdale. Because a lot of times when you're seeing a lot of really cool demonstration of what you can do inside of the Power Platform, we're focusing a lot on the presentation layer, which is at the top here, right? Especially from a standpoint of Power BI and Power Apps. There's a lot, obviously, analytical stuff. There's a lot of things that you can provide from a form and mobile app perspective inside of Power Platform. But what's kind of get left behind a lot of times in our conversation is the data side, right? With all this automation and all the presentation layer that you can put with the Power Platform, you have to store the data somewhere, whether that's SharePoint Online, right? On premises, SAP, we don't care, right? It could also be CDS. So why should we care about CDS? What does CDS provide? So that's sort of the segue that we want to get into in terms of Project Oakdale and CDS and why it should matter from the Power Platform journey perspective, right? Because in a lot of the example, again, we're going more to the data side of what you might be faced as an expense report, for example. That could be a use case that you're working with. You're having to post expense reports, and again, I came in from the SharePoint side. I've actually developed expense report apps using InfoPath, right? Like kind of like our time and reporting apps using InfoPath. And where it starts to fall apart is very much this structure, right? In this data modeling exercise. Because to just borrow Jamie as an example, if I have Jamie actually post an expense, right? So let's see if I can write here, right? Jamie, back in January 2020, when we all could travel, right? Jamie might post an expense report that then has an expense report line item that is attached to Jamie January 2020 expense that, he could have bought gum, right? He could have bought bottled water, right? So each of this is now a line item that then has to somehow make its way back and get related to Jamie's January 2020 expense. And these gum and bottled water might be attached to an expense code that's a food code That 0001, again, all these is arbitrary, right? But hopefully you get the idea. And then the expense then from Jamie has to get approved by his manager, Andrew. That is again on another source list. So in the SharePoint world, we would have used like a lookup field, right, to be able to correlate these lists together. But what tends to happen is when we talk about correlation and data modeling, it starts to fall apart if you're working with something like SharePoint that is more flat in nature, right? More singular, more very single track, because lookup is very much supported. But as you go through a lot of different lists and try to stitch that back up together, it's really hard from an application development perspective, not to add the security front too, right? Where Jamie can only see Jamie's expense. If Bobby puts in his expense here, only Bobby can see his expense, right? In SharePoint, like you start to get into like the SharePoint customizing list item permission, which is just a big no-no to begin with. So the whole point is we can do better, right? That's where CDS comes in. CDS can do better because it does support that relational data modeling. So the one-to-one, the one-to-many, the very much, one person has multiple expenses, and each expense can have multiple expense line items, is very much made for that relational data modeling. On top of that, what you can see here, it's presented in the UI, right? So Common Data Service, it is a SaaS offering that then doesn't require you to stand up things like servers and things like infrastructures on the back end, and presents everything in a nice UI perspective. So another way to do this, if some of you are have a database backend, right? If you're a SQL backend, if you know anything about SQL, you kind of have to run this select star from some kind of entity, right? You don't have to do that. In Common Data Service, you're pulling data, working with data, you're modeling data using all this construct of user interface. So it's kind of like the easy button to do modeling from a relational data perspective. So we're gonna do a little bit more on CDS. One of the things that I get really excited about is that there's this thing called the Common Data Model inside of Common Data Service. So let's go ahead and actually chart out what that looks like. I usually whiteboard this, but to kind of speed things up, I put everything in animation, right? But the idea behind the Common Data Model is that it comes with all the CDS. It comes with all the CDS instances. The idea behind the Common Data Model is think of it as all these very common entity that everybody should just get, right? It actually came from this thing called the Open Data Initiative, which is a partnership between Microsoft, SAP, and Oracle. The idea is that these three companies know that in order to do integration successfully across multiple disparate systems, it has to have a common language. So that's essentially what a CDM and Common Data Model is. It's a common language, right? We know that we're working with context. Inside of context, we have, first name, last name, address, phone numbers, all those constructs in terms of the type of fields they are, the name that we are labeling it from one system to the next, ideally should be the same. That's very much what the Common Data Model is. It's so popular now that it became actually a community project in GitHub. So you can actually find Common Data Model in GitHub. You can see all these extraction of entity and what's available inside the Common Data Model. So without doing anything at all, CDS comes with the Common Data Model. So from an integration perspective, it ties in really nicely if you want to bring in other line of business data that does speak the same language, right? And on top of that, CDS actually provides you the capability to use other apps that's already built in. So the apps that's usually in the picture is Dynamics apps, right? Whether you're using Sales app or you're using the Field Services app, there are all these entities that's tied into these applications that then again gets wrapped in, and you can actually then integrate it directly into CDS. So if you're working with third-party applications, our app source have hundreds and thousands of applications that you can actually deploy inside of CDS, right? That is something that is a framework that's already there. You essentially just click the button, say, I want this app here, and this entity just gets right built into the CDS. On top of that, you can bring in your entity stuff too into the picture. So anything custom that you want to have, just build in right into CDS. This fits your own organizational need, your own organizational structure. You can build all this inside of CDS, right? So what we want to show you, this is essentially CDS is a framework that allows you to borrow something that's already there, borrow something that you have purchased from a third-party partner, and also build yourself on top of everything else. We love the whole Lego analogy, right? Like you can buy the preset made Lego already and put on top of what's already made versus something that's already, that's a blank slate that you might want to start from scratch as well. By the way, if you have any questions, let me know. I know we only have 30 minutes, but Please let me know if you have any questions. We can address that. I tend to talk kind of fast, so hopefully I'm not breezing through this too quickly. But the idea of common data service, we talked about the data construct already, right? One of the big deal around common data service is the security model. So going back into the expense report example, right? I can make sure that any staff like Jamie and myself can only see our expense reports. But maybe if you get into the manager roles, the manager will be able to see his or her org units on down. Everybody that reports up to that manager can then see only their expense report. But as I go up the org structure, I can now open that up in terms of what I can read and what I can write, all built into the common data service structure. The logic part of the common data service is something I love as well. So think about like business rules and data validation, right? So let's say I can only charge up to $75, which is a max for food item types of expense report. I can build that logic and data validation business rules right next to the data. So regardless of the apps that I create that hooks into the common data service, is going to adhere to my logic that I built right next to the data, right? Because if you have sort of requirements or rules in business of a certain things that you want to adhere by, you want to keep that closest to the data as much as possible. And the fact that CDS can do that, now all the apps that I create around that data validation is going to adhere to that data validation rule that I have built right into CDS, by the way, using the UI, right? I'm not doing select star. I'm clicking and choosing and picking what's in the user interface to actually make that happen and stick. We talked about the data already, right? The whole CDM and making sure that we can use what's already there and be able to push it out and create additional entity if we need to. CDS is not only just a structure, but it also puts in the storage in there, right? So if you have the contact entity and the account entity and your own, let's say, project entity, which is custom, right? You can actually store data, and that's going to be part of your CDS instance. So it's not just a modeling exercise, but the storage and the content that goes into your apps can actually be stored inside of CDS as well. We touched up very briefly integration, but I really like this construct of data flows, right? The idea behind data flows is that now I can integrate with other line of business data, you know, hypothetically like AWS Data Lake, right? That may not even be in Azure or in the Microsoft cloud. I can bring that in, have that actually be integrated from a batch process perspective. So that I don't have to do the connections on load, right? Because there's a lot of connection that's happening on my app, on my Power Automate. Sometimes on runtime, it kind of bogs down our automation and our apps. What if we can do that integration on the back end with the CDS? So it kind of happens behind the scene. So my app, my automation is really just looking into CDS, and it's just a one connection instead of trying to connect to like 30 plus different connection that I might be having outside of my Microsoft Cloud conversation. So really, in short, we're really talking about connecting these very disparate systems, right? It's really nothing new. I mean, a lot of vendors that you talk to, it's going to pitch a very similar fashion, right? What's good about what we provide is the productivity side, you know, your teams, your SharePoint, things that everybody's already using from a standpoint of day-to-day. We can bring that conversation and connectivity bear into your productivity story. So kind of bring in then like, how do we get to Project Oakdale, right? Cloud Platform, obviously, over the last few years have a lot of momentum, even in the government space that we're in. That's a laggard. That's always that's a little bit behind because of compliance reason and security reasons, right? There's a little bit more of a rigor in terms of different services that's available in the government cloud. Even in those conversations, the agencies that I work with already know sort of the possibilities of what we can push Power Platform to do. So there's a lot of excitement behind that, right? You're seeing here that there's out of Fortune 500, 97% of it is and it's already using Power Platform on the day-to-day low code, no code business application development perspective, right? So to marry that with the excitement that's happening in Teams, right? This is already outdated. I just saw this, I think, a couple of weeks ago. This is now 5 billion meeting minutes that's happening every day. So every single day, there's 5 billion meeting minutes that's being run in Microsoft Teams, which is just like astronomical. It's kind of crazy, right? For those of us that's used Microsoft Teams, we can probably attest to the fact that it's probably the first thing and the last thing that we do from a standpoint of detaching and attaching ourselves back to the work world that we have, because it really captures everything from a standpoint of being able to meet, being able to chat, being able to collaborate on files. So it's very natural from a standpoint of application development and what you're working from a custom application perspective, and then bringing that in in context inside of your application of Teams, right? It just makes sense. So I think it's almost the progression of Project Oakdale just makes sense from a standpoint of you're already being productive in Teams anyways. You're using Power Platform from a standpoint of building applications and automating and doing dashboarding. Can we marry these two together? Because it was already doing that in the beginning. Let's make that process easier. So at least that's my take of why Project Oakdale is really, really exciting project to kind of talk about. So if you haven't heard of what Project Oakdale is, and again, and this is recorded, so hopefully it doesn't bite me here, right? This thing was called Data for about 2 days. It's no longer called Data. So if there's any remnants of Data out there, at least indefinitely, we're not calling it Data. We're calling it Project Oakdale. And if you know anything about a project name, it's temporary, right? So the feature is going to continue to get added just under a construct that's called Project Oakdale. Project Oakdale uses a subset of CDS, all the goodness that we talked about over the last couple of minutes. And then the only difference of Project Oakdale and CDS is Project Oakdale is specifically built in Microsoft Teams and by design, which is actually part of the excitement that I get when I talk about Project Oakdale as well, included in your Microsoft 365 license. Why is this awesome? A lot of times in organizations that we talk to, especially that's newer to CDS, right, we're kind of trying to extrapolate, like, what are you doing from a use case perspective? Let me go ahead and actually map that to see if CDS makes sense for you. Sometimes at the end of that conversation, cost is a prohibitive thing to get into the CDS platform because it requires the premium capabilities in Power Platform to get the CDS capabilities. Well, no longer is that going to be a problem through Project Oakdale, because with the Microsoft 365 licenses, you're going to be able to do that data modeling capability that we talked about in context of Teams. So I think this is a super fantastic decision by the engineering team to go down that direction and enable a lot of the people to take advantage of Project Oakdale, right? So in short, everything that we talked about from the data modeling is available in context in Teams. So the way you build app, the way you consume the apps are going to be directly inside of Teams. So let's show you what that looks like. All right, you know what? Before we go there, any questions so far? I haven't been looking at the chat. How are we doing, Jamie?
You're good. No questions. Everyone seems really excited.
Either that or confused. I hope it's it's the former, man. Let's get started. Let's keep going here. All right, please do let me know if you have any questions. Let me go ahead and actually click on a video here. This is what it looks like to create an app using Project Oakdale. You can see that you're picking a team, right? So one of the first things you can do is create a table. So if you click on the table from Project Oakdale, directly inside of Teams, you can do this data modeling that we talked about, right? So picking the right field, doing the relationship in terms of what field then attached to what table that might be somewhere else, right? So in this case, we are doing an event itinerary example here. What you'll start to see is actually some remnant, or like I call it like Microsoft Lists remnant, right? For those of you that has been tracking Microsoft Lists and some of the modern story, you can see that there's some components here that is kind of using the things called the fluid framework. For some reason, my video is dancing, but you can see that there, as you're going here, typing in the information. For those of us that work with CDS, you can be frank, right? Sometimes entering data into CDS is a bit of a pain in the neck, right? Doing things like this is a little bit more refreshing for me because it's using things that are a little bit more intuitive in design. And whatever we're doing in Project Oakdale, we're going to make that available in CDS moving forward too. So any improvement that you're seeing in the Project Oakdale initiatives, that's going to start to matriculate and make its way to CDS, which is fantastic, right? So you just go back because it was kind of dancing around. This is an example of an entry that is built using the tables that I create through Project Oakdale. So from a design perspective and also entry perspective, again, I'm doing all of this inside of Microsoft Teams, right? So for those of you that have seen like the fluid framework, the Microsoft list, that kind of gives you the remnants of what's coming in Project Oakdale, which I think is pretty exciting. Here's an example of a design, no, not this one, but here it is, right? The design experience of what you're going to get with Project Oakdale. For those of you that's been working with the Canvas app, this is going to feel very natural, right? It looks just like a Canvas app. You're seeing the tree view, the navigation view, the different connections that you can make on the left-hand side, your design canvas in terms of how you want to move around with the user interface is directly in the middle, but they're all are provided in the context of Teams. So you're not really leaving Teams, you're building the apps, you're building the tables, the data, and then you're then deploying it inside of Teams as well. So when you're coming in and actually viewing the app, This is what it looks like, right? So you're having your teams here on the left-hand side. It shows up just like a tabs, right? From an end user perspective, they don't know if this is a third-party app, this is a first-party app, or this is a Project Oakdale. It looks everything in context, right? Because at the end of the day, business users don't care. In this case, they're working with Project X. Project X just needs to do the storyboarding, right? So in this case, it looks like it's a storyboarding exercise where you have the storyboard and then the list of features that might be listed to that particular story, right? A really good example between the one-to-many relationship data modeling that you have, because for every single story that you have many features that attach to that story. And right before in the SharePoint world, you would have to again do a lookup. In the context of Project Oakdale, because you have that data modeling kind of stitched in on the back end to do relational modeling, you can do all of that in context of your app now. Right? And what's good about that is, again, it looks just like your third-party app or first-party app offering, right? Even if that's something custom that you created yourself. From a standpoint of power user and team owners that's going to take care of this app now, it looks just like any other app. And what's good about that is discovering this app too becomes an app store experience, right? And by the way, I'm teasing out the bots here. I don't think I have enough to talk about the Power Virtual Agent side of it. There's also a Power Virtual Agent through Project Oakdale that's going to be made available. But the idea is discovering apps now that you create through Project Oakdale that's custom in nature is done through the app team store. So whether you're looking at the planner, which is a first party offering, or let's say your Jira connector, right, which is a Teams app, or this custom app that you created through Project Oakdale's, we don't care, right? It looks just the same from a standpoint of being able to deploy that and have that consumable for your team users, which I think is awesome. Again, it's something that I tease out, and if we have time here, it looks like we might have time to talk about Power Virtual Agent. You can create your bots, to do conversational AI using Power Virtual Agent, right? Power Virtual Agent as a standalone has been made available for quite some time now. But what's good with the Project Oakdale is that Power Virtual Agent capabilities is also going to get tied into the Office 365 offering. So that's nothing that you would have to pay extra for. You would just be able to leverage that inside of Teams. So imagine having a chat bot or having a group conversation bot that you want to ask a question, give it some context for it to then look for a list of frequently asked questions to then respond back from a bot perspective. You can then push that and deploy it through Teams, all through your Office 365 entitlement and licensing story, right? So here's an example of a bot, because of course, Microsoft has to have a Contoso bot, right? Hi, I'm Contoso bot. There's capabilities to actually make it a way that you respond with text, and also a way that you respond from a choice of selections that you can select from your bot experience. Again, the Power Virtual Agent experience is nothing new, but Power Virtual Agent easy and through the Office 365 licensing is absolutely something that's new and exciting that's coming through Project Oakdale. So a quick recap of what's provided from Project Oakdale, which is on, I guess, my left. Hopefully it's not doing the mirror thing in Teams. Project Oakdale, it's going to be supporting Teams only. So from a connector perspective, it is connecting only to Office 365. Think SharePoint, think Outlook, think Teams, right? And also any of your Project Oakdale's tables and data that you create through the Project Oakdale implementation. CDM, the common data model that we talked about before, your account, your orgs, your leads, right? The things that are done through Open Data Initiative is not yet available, but will be coming soon in future iteration. From a standpoint of what IT Pro can do in dialing out the knob of what you can use Project Oakdale in context of, that's available through the Power Platform admin centers, and it's rolled into the same admin centers that was available through with the CDS framework as well, right? So CDS remains the same. We don't know what this new name is going to be just yet whenever we figure that out. But from a standpoint of what CDS provides is very much the same. If you know CDS, it's still going to do the same thing in terms of being able to open up to over 300 connectors, right? Talk about like that business logic that we talked about, having the CDM support and so forth, and building apps in and out of the Teams construct. So Project Oakdale is very much closed off on the Teams interaction from a standpoint of accessing and development. CDS is meant to provide a standalone experience on top of the Teams experience that you might have. quick recap, why teams, right? And why Project Oakdale is something that I'm personally excited about. Number one is hopefully simple to build that you saw, you click, it's navigation based, it's all in context of teams. It's gonna be simple to deploy, right? You saw that there's the ability to just quickly save, publish, and be able to consume that inside of the Teams experience and be able to consume that through the Teams App Store, and also easy to manage because the idea is that we still are leveraging the same environment scoping that we might have in the Power Platform governance side, and just pushing the modern workplace story and the team story as a part of that governance story that they have to then manage. But from a standpoint of Admin Center, what they can do from an IT pro perspective, it's still using the same toolings that we know and love through the Power Platform admin story. How are we doing, Jamie? What time? How much time do we have? Do we have 9 minutes?
Yes. You have 9 minutes left. Plenty of time to answer some questions. So I think Shannon, if you'd be willing to come off mute and just ask her a question, that'd be great.
Sure, thanks, Jamie, and thanks, Bobby. This is all exciting and super interesting. My question for you is whether or not the data that's stored in Project Oakdale is going to be accessible by guests.
That is a good question. I don't know. I would think so. Because the Teams construct, obviously the B2B, and both from the standpoint of Canvas apps in Power Apps, and also Teams is already B2B ready. I would just imagine that extends it to that area, but because I haven't had the pleasure of playing around with it myself, I don't know the answer to that question, Shannon. But once I do, I'm happy to share. From a standpoint of availability, which probably is going to come up as a question here in the forum, it was supposed to be made available in August from a standpoint of private/public preview. I haven't seen it in my tenant, but we hope to get a hand of it hopefully within the next month, right? Then we can answer some of those semantic questions that we had, specific questions that we had around that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Anybody else want to come off mute and ask questions?
Yes, please. Can I ask a question to Bobby Chang?
So, Anton, man, I'm asking you questions, man. You don't get to ask questions these days.
Oh man. So quick. This is a quick one, and I'm not for sure, but I think I know that. I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure that I'm on the right page. But as far as deploying information and deploying small apps, things like that, they're inside of a team. Will they be able to go cross teams?
That is a good question. This is completely Bobby's guess for not playing with this myself. My guess is no.
Okay.
But that's just my guess.
I've heard
Antoine.
no.
Yeah, my guess.
I've heard no as well, but I wasn't sure if
And
anything changed.
I don't know until we test it, right? But my feeling of saying no is because each of these apps are going to roll out to their own environment. So each team is going to have their own equivalent of Power Platform environment. So that being said, to me, sounds like a guardrail that says that the data, unless you're talking to other services outside of Teams, is going to be specific to your teams only, that team.
Okay.
But that's my guess. So it looks like Melissa might know a little bit more than I do.
I only know because of April's presentation today.
Oh.
April should be doing this presentation.
We like when April weighs in. So thank you, April, for that. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Anybody else? Questions?
Yeah, this is Jenna. I had a quick one. You talked about the design application interface is going to feel very similar to the current Canvas app building interface and platform. But are like the controls and the features very similar to, like if I have an existing app that I wanted to convert to this platform, would I be able to recreate it like almost identically, but just using CDS instead of SharePoint?
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea. If you look at it from here, Jenna, right? I mean, you could see that a lot of the component, even the icons, are very similar to what you're seeing in Canvas. Now, support exportability, I would be curious to see what that would be like, because again, the idea is that this was meant to be Teams only. So from my understanding too, is like even exporting this out, it's gonna not feel the same like you would as a standalone Canvas apps.
Okay.
But from a
Yeah,
standpoint of just designing, right? Like designing, being able to connect to data and actually bring in your control into your Canvas area, it's going to be, it should feel exactly the same as your Canvas app right now.
Okay. Yeah, we just have a couple projects that we're like, oh, we really wanted to use CDS, but again, cost was prohibitive based on what we were doing. So we're using SharePoint, but now that this would be available, those would be great test cases for us to kind of move into this platform.
That's right. That's right. And on that front, it's not just a good story for customer, right? But it's also a good story for ISV. So think about the components when we talk about the Teams App Store. You know, I mean, like our worldwide team from a Power App perspective is running into some of the challenges too, right? But again, we're thinking about both the data layer and also the presentation layer. The presentation layer is easy to export out, but once we have that dependency of where that data resides, especially if I want to just pull it in the context of team, that becomes hard to do because it has all these dependency of where that data connectors is going to. But now if I can wrap that all up in a nice project Oakdale, like kind of does that zip export file, right? Then all the data backend and the presentation layers all into one. So that becomes a really good story for partners and ISV that wants to roll out custom solutions as well.
And then can you still embed Power Automate flows into the app?
Yeah, so the Power Automate is still going to look into the Teams construct, right? So what you're doing in Power Automate now in terms of connectors and pulling that into part of your story and automation is still going to be there.
Okay, so you can still use that as your trigger from Power Apps.
Exactly. Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Anybody else want to ask a question, make a comment?
It's new, right? You notice I just say I don't know for half the question that's been asked anyways.
It's all good. It was just great. Hey, you know more than most of us, so thank you, Bobby, so much for this. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for the opportunity and good connecting with y'all.
Yep. Coming up next, we got Uday coming up with how to use UI flows with WinAutomation.
So I'm just gonna go. So first, disclaimer. I had so my company email, the UPN was being changed just recently, and then we're kind of restricting on who get what access. So they're putting more control. So just before, like an hour before this, right? Okay, I was like, reboot. I try to do everything fresh. I want to start, and then all of a sudden nothing works. So I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? So I started pinging Jimmy and the folks over there and saying, hey, all right, so let's join. So I was going to go first, and thanks, Bobby, actually going first and giving me a little bit of time to get ready. So I do have, so I'm using my my personal demo tenant. And so I don't know how much content I have over there for the demo, but I'm going to try my best to do a clean demo as possible. And again, if there's any follow-up questions towards the end, want to talk with me later on, please do so. I'm happy to come back. And also, if you guys give me 10, 15 minutes, I can complete the demo if the demo doesn't work. Okay, so that's the disclaimer. And other thing, thank you for having me. This is a good opportunity for me to share what I've been working on for the last, since it came out, the WinAutomation. I am a big fan of WinAutomation. I cannot say that for UI flows, but WinAutomation, I will definitely say that. But WinAutomation, basically, it's a desktop application, right? So UI flow, you do need that in order to tie that together from your cloud over to your desktop. All right, so that's about a little bit high level. So Uday Adhikari, I live in Austin, Texas. I work for a company called Cyclotron. I do Power Platform. Before that, it was app dev, professional like C#, ASP.NET, all of those started with back in the old days. Moved over to SharePoint for many years, and then the natural fit is Power Platform. And now I strictly do pretty much 24/7 Power Platform. So I feel lucky. I love it. I'm passionate. So I don't have to go work on, I do a little bit of SharePoint here and there, but strictly Power Platform. So I lead the practice here at Cyclotron, and I work with customers, variety of clients all over the world. It's fun, actually. I love it. That's about me. So again, thank you for having me today. And I'm going to skip some of these. Just wanted to kind of quickly tell you like where RPA market is, right? So that hopefully it'll kind of excite you and say, hey, there is a market for that. So 4 billion by 2023, and with WinAutomation acquisition, Microsoft is in the visionary magic quadrant for Gartner. Not the leader yet, but give them a couple of months. Once they finish up UI flow to WinAutomation integration tightly coupled, I think they're gonna go jump, and it's gonna be awesome. So it's a good market. I mean, a lot of the things that sometimes when you cannot automate, yes, there are about 370, I believe, 70 plus SOAR connectors available. It changes every day, right? 7 added last month, 10 were added this month, so it just keeps changing, which is good. So there are about 370 plus connectors, and sure, if one of your data sources are in that 370 plus connectors that are already available in your already available, right? That's one of your data sources, great. So next step will be REST API. And then if you curate your custom connectors, and the next step will be data gateway, connect to whatever data sources you have. But what if you don't have that? Your data is in mainframe. Someone is basically just looking over the screen and looking at it and manually copying, right? Or a legacy Win32 app, or an IE11 browser, by the way, which is being retired pretty soon, not supported. I had a user where their application runs on IE only, and then it's a bank. Usually, it's more of a financial companies where you see legacy application, and their automation, their problem was that every day morning, these loan officers were logging into the system, looking at any overdraft, and then whatever the action they needed to do, 5, 10, 20, whatever emails they needed to, they were doing that. So we said, okay, let's use WinAutomation. Actually, it was before WinAutomation. We're trying to do UI flows, and apparently UI flow doesn't support IE. You have to be a modern browser. So we're like, okay, what do we do? And so we're working with Microsoft. Right between that time, the WinAutomation acquisition happened. I'm like, yes, sweet. Okay, this supports IE. And then we did a project with them using WinAutomation. They also had a pop-up where we got the login ID, the loan officer ID through Power Automate, UI flow, pass it in an array, right? Move over to WinAutomation, and then logged into the site, do whatever we need to do, take a screen capture of that, and send them an email. So it basically saved them from like 4 to 5, 6 minutes down to nothing in the morning. But all they have to do is look at their email. So it was a really good cost saving for them. So that's one use case that we implemented. So let's go over what do you need, right? So this, I just said just now about connectors. The first thing that you want to ask is, where is your data before you do? You cannot just say, hey, let's go to RPA project. RPA is expensive, meaning not from cost. Yes, maybe from cost, but more from resources. If you want to do unattended, you have to stand up a server, right, and log in. Now it's actually multiple within one VM. You can have multiple user account come in, and you can run in parallel. UI flows you can run in parallel, but you do have to have multiple user account. So which is great. It's going to use data gateway. Data gateway, you put it on cluster. But the first thing you want to ask is, can I connect to your data source? Is those data sources are within that 370 connectors that are already in there? If the answer is yes, scratch RPA. Stick with that. And the next level is, okay, no, we don't have the connectors. How about API endpoints? Most likely modern technologies, right? They do have REST API, the connector endpoints. And if they say yes, but the cost is very, very high. Sometimes when you're working with these third-party vendors, they have REST API, but they're going to charge you $200 per transaction, right? To get, you have to pay $200, and you only get once a day or whatever. The cost is high. Then you kind of compare with the RPA and say, do you know what? The RPA will be valuable. So then you go to RPA. Then once you do that, then only if once you rule out the REST API cost, right, and to go high, low, whatever that is, and not possible, then you go to the next level is your RPA. RPA obviously scalable wise, it's not that scalable, but now I can say it. I mean, obviously now you can run in parallel with the data gateway within the cluster, so you can make it scalable, but still, if you have like a lot of transactions, so it is not a very scalable solution. It is getting better. Then now you have a dilemma for, should I go just UI flow all of it, or should I go WinAutomation? I'm biased. I'm gonna say I'll go WinAutomation first. It's just powerful. It has a lot of things in there. So I go WinAutomation first. Then obviously I'm using UI flow, but I'm using UI flow just to call WinAutomation. I do have to leverage that because WinAutomation is a client software, right? It's installed like this. It's a lightweight client software, like a Windows application. So I definitely have to use UI flow to connect to WinAutomation. But my first thing I go is I go, okay, I'm using UI flow and then to call, but I'm gonna try to see all this validation, right? I have this, yes, email. Currently, there's no, if your mailbox is on-prem, then you can set up your SMTP. Even in the cloud, you can set up your SMTP, but I think you have to open certain ports and the security guys are not gonna like it. They wanna restrict that cloud environment, right? So which is good. So then what I do is I pass my value from WinAutomate to UI flow, and then I use Power Automate to send emails. I know it's kind of like going back and forth, right? Go there, do that, do that. It is at this time, that's how it's gonna work. If your security folks are okay with opening up that couple of ports, then you can use WinAutomation to send email from WinAutomation itself if your mailbox is in the cloud. If your mailbox is in the on-prem game, it supports, you configure it, 2010, whatever, there's like 3 or 4 mail servers it supported, you configure it and you send out. Scheduling, right? You wanna run WinAutomation at a certain time, definitely you can schedule that too. So then comes your desktop and UI. I mean, you have the web automation and desktop automation, right? Then like, okay, what do I do? If we go with UI flows, you have the Selenium add-on, which is an installation that you have to add to a browser. Using that, you can edit, you can record all your steps, and you can go back and edit it, right? Something is maybe when you're recording, you took 10 seconds because someone interrupted you. Your kid came or whatever, and then you got distracted. No, you can go back and say, okay, instead of 10 seconds, I want it to run for 2 seconds. So those are the things you can do in Selenium UI, the web automation. So I'm not going to cover that. I'm going to, as you can probably figure out by now, that I'm very passionate around WinAutomation. So that's what we're going to cover today. And then also with UI flow, you can still do desktop automation. You might have seen in the past, like, I don't know when RPA came out, the invoicing, a lot of those, right? Charles and also those guys demo all the time with that invoicing system. So yes, UI flow can do both. For web automation, you have to install Selenium add-in to your browser. For desktop automation, you have to have a service running, UI flow service running. So it's just an install. I think I have a slide in here somewhere. Okay, any questions so far? I know I'm going kind of giving you guys kind of like a background. And how long do I have, Jimmy? I know I'm going crazy here, but.
You're fine. You have plenty of time.
Okay.
Just keep on going, and I'll let you know if you're running long.
Okay. All right. Yeah, please do. All right. So there are some like for all these installation, right? Setting up, download Selenium you need for UI flows. For WinAutomation, you need the WinAutomation installer. WinAutomation also has an exe, and it also has a service. I know I'm kind of showing you the wrong. Well, I'm trying to be straight on the camera, so I'm sharing the right window, but my other things, all the services are on other. Let me see, does it come? No, I can't. Okay, I'll see you in a little bit. I'll share that. But basically, it's a service that runs on your machine. So you do have to have like Selenium add-in for UI flow and UI flow service desktop running, right? And then for WinAutomation, you need to have the exe where you will be editing all of those manual actions, tasks. Then you also need to have the WinAutomation service running. Okay, so that's out of the way. And then the gateway. Anytime you, obviously, right? There has to be some kind of handshake from cloud to on-prem, and the gateway is your kind of adapter. It says, oh, you're coming from internet or cloud. Let me change the protocol, and I'm gonna connect to on-prem, and same thing, back and forth, right? So you do need the gateway in the middle, which is for both UI flow to call desktop, and yeah, I mean, obviously, WinAutomation is not in the cloud; it's only in the on-prem. So UI flow, data gateway, and then connect to either WinAutomation. So basically, what happens is UI flow connects to WinAutomation as a desktop application, and that actually does what it needs to do. Okay, so that's out of the way. Yep. So like I said, the acquisition happened about 2 months now. Somewhere on that line, fairly new. The WinAutomation, the company is called Softomotive, but they own the tool WinAutomation. So now they're clearly integrated with Microsoft Power Automate UI Flow. Okay, so with that, I can bring in the Explorer, like how to create those. There were some of the, let me see if I have, I know there are some best practices. These are all pulled from RPA in a day session. Definitely, if you guys pull that out, all of those are there, like what's supported, what's not supported, multi-window, like multiple monitors are not supported in UI Flow, whereas it's supported in WinAutomation. That's why, I mean, there's a lot of things that are not supported in UI Flow, but they are supported in WinAutomation. So I tend to go start UI Flow first. WinAutomation first, and then go to UI Flow. Installing recording, right? Obviously, you can record what you're doing, playback to check, edit, optimize, monitor the run, gateway cluster. I talked about that in order to make it scalable. UI flow connection, unattended supported, all of those are there. Let me see, I'm gonna quickly, and then I'm gonna jump into, these are some of the things I just talked like a high level. Okay, and then WinAutomation, like I said, it has a trimmed down version of browser that it can run, and you can punch in the URL, it brings up, and then you can do automation. But I focus on specific browser need, because a lot of times these are legacy, so you can just focus on, let's say, IE or Firefox or Chrome or Edge, whatever browser. I focus on those because it will be listed in your dropdown what browser your application is running, usually for web application. As you can see, like the recording, right, same as, and then they do highly recommend, instead of using your mouse, you have to use keyboard, like Control-C, Control-V, Control-Alt to select the text if it's anything in there. So with any RPA automation, both for UI flows as well as WinAutomation, use your keyboard. That's more dependable than using your mouse. Mouse tends to go by where, in what location where you clicked, and what, even like right click is not available, right? So always use, whenever you can, use your mouse, keyboard. Sorry, not mouse, keyboard. Yeah, keyboard mouse during playback. Oh, and absolutely, when you're playing back, you stay back and relax, let it play, right? You don't want to do anything. And then also when you're recording, you want to record in one window first. Like today, I know it's going to be a challenge. I have 3 windows here. I may have to like shut down everything and just do it when I do the demo. It does go wonky when you hover over and then the element goes off the screen. All right. So with that, I mean, I'll share this with you guys. I mean, there's a lot of like pros and cons. What do you do? What do you not do? When you install, what do you have to do? All of those are in there. Okay, so I am going to bring the WinAutomation. So I had already installed the WinAutomation, the software, and when you install it, it's going to ask you have a WinAutomation account or Microsoft, the Power Automate. You obviously WinAutomation account, no, right? We're all working on Microsoft ecosystem, so just do that. That's the first option. Do that. Type in your email address. Boom, it goes, and it's going to ask you for master key. I freaked out. I was like, what is my master key? Usually when you are installing software, when you say master key, the vendor has given you a key and that's where you punch in. That's what in my head. I was like, I don't have it. Oh no, I can't use it. No, that's actually for you to recover. You'd say you need to recover one of the processes here, one of the UI flow in here. So basically for recovery, you need that key. So just type it in whatever you want, right, randomly, but make sure that you save it. Save that master key somewhere so that if you may need it later on down the road. And that's what I didn't know. I was like, I freaked out. Okay, I can use. Where's my master key? And then I was like, read somewhere, and oh, the master key is the one that you need for recovery. So type in whatever and save it somewhere. And that's what I did. And then once you do that, it will ask you for a consent. I don't know how tightly your tenant is. If it's highly secure with, you can't do this, if you have to be in that role, all of those, because we implemented recently, it threw me off. Just like I said, hour before, it basically threw me off and I was like, oh, you can't do anything. And said like, okay, forget it. I'm just gonna use my own tenant. I can do whatever I want. And then it's working okay, but we'll see how the demo goes. I have not tested yet. So yeah, it'll ask you for consent. If I go over here, I believe here somewhere in this screen here, so basically just follow that. This is what I was getting constantly, and I even contacted our administrator. He couldn't help me. He couldn't help me, and so I was like, basically, I just logged into my tenant and started doing this, and immediately I was able to consent. So if you get this, work with your administrator, whoever is global admin, to get that going. And once you do that, sometimes it does take a little bit longer. So don't wait until last minute. So just do it ahead of time, and then you will be. Sometimes it may take up to 30 minutes in order for you to be able to use after you do consent. It may take a little bit longer. Okay, so and then after you did that, obviously we're ready to go. So I'm gonna go back here. What is this? So then once you install, this is what you get, except for these 2 folders in here. Those are my demos that I've been doing for proof of concept or working with client or whatever. And right off the bat, you can see examples, beginners, intermediate, advanced. So all of those are already there. Ton of things are for you to learn, for you to kind of play, copy that, put it in make your own process, and then start editing, right? And start making whatever you need to do. Excel, a lot of Excel there. Reading through the Excel, cell by cell, finding how many columns are there, how many rows are there, defining the table, looping through, all of those are there already. You don't have to create manually. So that's your, it's called processes. So now terminology changed now, okay? So in WinAutomation, they are called processes. So you're creating processes. In Power Automate, you create flow. In, I guess, UI flows, you create UI flows. And in WinAutomation, you create processes. And so that's the example, all of those examples right here. You just go CSP, read, right? All of those web automation is here. Logical, I definitely used that when I was doing it early on. And then you go per triggers. This is actually, okay, let me see, when no process running. Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to skip here. I'm going to go to schedule. Schedule, like I said, you can create a schedule. I will say, let's create a new schedule for a certain time, or reoccurring or a specific time, and you can define what process you want to run, and then it will run at that time. And then logs, this is also important. Everything gets logged in here. I had to uninstall and install, but hey, it still took all my, because I was using the same folder to install. So it looks like all of it still took it. And I had a lot of those invalid things in here. And then in the option, yeah, the master key is here. When you save it, if you need to change it, you can change it later on. All of those. I was trying to see where that email, you set up your email. I don't have the on-prem, so I didn't bother to, but I know there's a step somewhere. Maybe it's somewhere in here. But okay, so that's the quick overview of the landing, I guess landing, you can call this landing page, right? And then if I want to create a new process, right, I want to automate something. So I go new, it's going to ask me a name. Here you can see that process designer, macro recorder, or web recorder. As you can see, web recorder means like a globe. So that's a web application recorder. And this is for your desktop recorder. regardless whether you go here or here, like in one of these options, you're gonna land here. If you know your steps, like you wanna step by step, you wanna know what you're trying to do, and you feel comfortable doing that, and not like one of these. If you do web recorder, you can start recording your activities. Then you can, regardless of where you start, you're gonna land here. This is your kind of like an editor, like Canvas, where you start debugging. So I'm gonna do web recorder, but when like I said, regardless of where I go, it's gonna land me here. If I want to do manually one by one, then I would go here and say, okay, I want this control, that control. I want to go here, go there. That's how I would do. So I'm going to do web recorder. Okay, now it threw me on the other screen. Let me bring it here. So that's why when anytime I do my RPA, these multiple screens is not ideal when you're recording. Okay, so here, as you can see immediately, what browser do you want to use, right? Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome is. And then there is also a use automate browser. This is the one that I was talking to you about earlier. This is within WinAutomation, and it's a trimmed down, lightweight, load faster browser that's available within WinAutomation only. I have not used it, but I know it's a trimmed down version. So I usually use IE for a lot of in this case, I'm going to do Chrome because I have one of the sites available here. So I'm going to say Chrome. And if you have a site that's running, why is it not coming? Let me see. It should tell me, okay. For Is, it's telling me these are my active sessions, the browser that I have ready in there. So, oh, and one thing actually, there's a setup on IE that you have to do is you have to disable the security. Otherwise, this is gonna fail. Let's see if I still have it disabled. And then we'll go, I'll show you here in a little bit. So this actually went over to my active Microsoft Edge browser session and said, hey, you have 3 tabs. I don't know how many tabs. Let's go confirm. Well, I have 2 browsers. I'm not sure which one it picked up. I think it picked up this one. I think that's where I have my software WinAutomation has been added. And let me see on this one what I don't have it here. So it only picked up the one add-on that I have picked up. So it did not know. Same thing happened with, I think, from Chrome, because I have it here. This is there's a site called invoicely.com. I could register for a demo account, and so that's what I'm using for any of my UI RPA sessions, because it's a true, you log in, you kind of go there, and it kind of resembles what I was doing for my client also. And so I was able to kind of prototype it here and then work with them and then do the project. There's another website called rpaengine.com, I believe. Something, I have it here somewhere. So that the rpaengine.com site, what that does is you can, because I know you guys will have a question for me here in a little bit. What if my control changes, right? From top right to top left, or bottom, or wherever my control is changing. In that RPA engine.com, the website, what it does, it changes the position of the control every time you refresh. So sometimes your first name is up, sometimes first name is down. So what you're doing is you're going by ID, you're not going by pixel position, like X and Y coordinate. No, that's not the right way. You look at HTML DOM, and then each of those will have an ID. And so you go by either div ID or item ID. And so again, this is HTML. In HTML, DOM, what is DOM? DOM, man, it's been a while, I guess. So DOM is basically, if I do right click on it, inspect element, right? This is my HTML. This is actually, what is DOM? Oh man, it's been a while, I guess. This is all the HTML, and as you can see, they will have name, current ID. So I'm going by ID, current ID. So wherever they move this current ID, right? It goes from top to bottom to left to right. I don't care. Put wherever you want to put. but if I go by X and Y coordinate, if they move, the field move from left to right, I'm screwed. I'm picking something else. So you have an option to get that ID. And so WinAutomation that's why I like WinAutomation even better. Okay, so that's out of the way. We'll do some of the things here. I am going to have to install the WinAutomation add-in here. I think when I installed, so when you're installing WinAutomation, it will ask you what browsers you want to add the extension to. I may have just done it for Microsoft Edge because, like I said, I had to uninstall. So where is the add-on? I don't do this every day, so help me here. Anyone? Settings, no. Bookmark.
Try more tools.
Okay.
Extensions.
Extensions, yep. Thank you. Let me see if I can pick in a.
That's only switching what you have installed already. You have to go to the store, I think.
Oh, that's right. Go find something right somewhere.
Yeah. Down there, lower left.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
And now you should be able to search for it.
Oops.
Whatever it is.
WinAuto. Oh yeah, if I can spell it right.
That is the key.
AUTO. All right. So let's see. Let's do it again. WinAuto.
Doesn't look like it exists.
Interesting. So available for, no, not that one. Oh, extension. Soft automotive. So, oh, interesting. What is it called? I can go back here. I can pick this browser actually. I'll just bring in. Okay, let me see if I can. Okay, there you go. That is. Let me see what it is called. This soft automotive WinAutomation. Yeah. I wanted to do it on a clean browser. So yeah, I can actually get rid of these and then just go to Invoicely. Invoicely.com here. Login. Go to dashboard. I think that's it. Okay, you can see I've created a couple. Okay, so that's good. So I'm gonna get out of this because it doesn't know that the new browser session has opened. So I'm gonna back that, but regardless, it went ahead and created. So let me delete that. New process, DCUZ, okay. Oh, I think I have it there. I was trying to test earlier. Do I have that? Maybe not there. I need to create outside of here. Come on, load. Maybe. Okay, what do I do? I have another open? Nope. Okay, so I'm just gonna create here DC UZ August. And I don't like to use although in the example they have hyphen, all of those special characters, because you do have to, when you call from UI flow, you do have to remember what you have it in there. So I usually just space is okay for readability. Okay, so it went over this screen again. So I'm gonna go and see what I have. Okay, do you know what? This is picking up. Yeah, I have UI flow in here, but not on this one. Why is it picking? Interesting. Why is it picking? Okay, I mean, let me. Sometimes I know you. It may be that it's thinking I want to cancel all of it, and I'm gonna run it again. And WinAutomation actually does take up a lot of your resources on your computer. I've noticed that it kind of bogs down your system. Okay, so now if I do a new process and then say dcuzog, I'm going to do web recorder. It's going to go on the other screen. I have no idea why this is not picking up. So, okay.
Well, if it's not working, we don't need to keep trying.
Yeah.
Out.
Yeah.
Why don't we take a minute here? Does anybody have any questions for Uday?
I have a quick question. And it was earlier in your presentation. And before I'm going to ask my question, I want to say thank you so much for taking your time today to show us. So that's the first thing I got to say. You mentioned gateways, and I know that usually if you have a gateway already set up, can you repurpose or use that gateway again for this process as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely use the same gateway.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna log in here on the same browser, and then I mean I could pick up completely new and say, hey, no, I want to launch a new browser. But let me just continue here. Again, how much time do I have? Another maybe 10 minutes or so.
Yes, that's fine. Again, don't struggle needlessly.
No worries.
If the demo gods aren't on your side, don't worry about it. Again, if anybody wants to chime in with questions about what you've seen, or if you have a general question about WinAutomation or UI flows, this is a great time to ask somebody who's got a lot more experience, certainly more experience than I have with this tool.
Okay. Looks like
let me ask you this, Uday. If somebody wants to get started with WinAutomation, where should they get started?
Yeah, it's a good question. So first thing, obviously, these two links are going to help you kind of setting it up right way, right? There are a couple of things in the upfront, just like what are those? What do you need to do? This tool will walk you through the add-on to the browser, the service that runs, what license do you need, what are not supported, right? So all of those are listed in these two. And then once you get this done, and then obviously after that, I mean, it walks you through how to create right here, step by step. And then if you want to do more, obviously there's RPA in a day content freely available, Microsoft provided, right? Just go through that. There's lab, there's instructions, and go from there.
Very cool.
Yeah, so let me quickly go from Power Automate. What do you need to do? And then, so not only the way, so you can pass the thing over to Power Automate and you can call, but you can also pass, obviously, like I said earlier, you can also pass data from WinAutomate over to Power Automate and or UI flows. Basically, how you do that is you create a flow with HTTP requests, and it's nothing but an endpoint, right? Your Power Automate is an endpoint REST API that any application can call. And so what you're doing is from WinAutomate, you call that REST API of the flow, and then you pass in whatever value you need to pass in, and like in JSON file, right? And then you just go from there. Let me see if, okay, so for UI flow, you go here, you clear new. Obviously, you want to create WinAutomation because desktop, because WinAutomation is a desktop application, and you do next. DCUZ August, let's say. And then this will be city name, right? Variable value will be DC default. Now you don't have to type it in. Enter city name. This is a default one. Obviously now it's supported text, sensitive text, and array. They both, array was not supported before, now array is supported. Array is a little bit trickier how you pass it. So now when I do that, first thing I need to do is, if you do recorder, that's the Selenium UI flow recorder. And then when you do WinAutomation, before that template already had the UI flow, recorder by default. So you had to delete and then you have to add. So now they took the second step out, Microsoft just recently, and now you can just do pick between either UI flow or WinAutomation. So I'm picking WinAutomation, and then I'm going to say, what do you want to do? Right now they only have one action, so WinAutomation action. And then now I need to go to my path, right? It basically says, where is your process that you just created? So let's say in our case, it will be, basically you go here, and then our path is under my processes. UI UG August is one. It doesn't have anything, but let's say that's our active one. Then you would go over to, just type it in. Like there's an example right there. It just says right there. Where you do, it's a case sensitive, so be careful not to type in a case, and be careful you just type in a case sensitive. So, and then ours is DC UZ August. I believe we have that. And then if we wanted to pass CD variable, right, we can. And so now let's see what I have here. Should be able to save it. It's going to ask me to, hey, you want to say test all those as yes, next. Sure, I want to test it. Let's see if this test now, and you'll see a service kind of pop up. Working, coming, maybe. See how it the process DC UZ AZ completed. That the WinAutomation got triggered. That means so at least it's working. So what we need to do is now basically go here and then edit. Right. So I'm gonna open that up. And then let's say we want to, there's nothing in here. And let's say we wanted to build one at a time. Launch website, right? So it'll be launch new External Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, whatever we want to launch. Let's say we want to launch Chrome. So drag and drop. And it's telling us which browser, if there are active one that's running, then you do that, right? So are attached to running Chrome. So I do have that, right? I have this site. I'm going to click. We have to do this in a clean way. So I am going back to cleaner, and then I'm saying by title, and you can say what, again, not by title, but by URL, and see which one pops up here. Okay, you know what, something is not liking it. Otherwise, you will see when you do the attach running Chrome, it will, you can do by URL, you can do by title, and if you, whatever your title of the web is, you can put it in here. Right now, for some reason, it's not understanding. I think I don't have the UI flow plugin installed on this. That's why. So let me pick is. I should be able to do it. So where's Microsoft? Is Firefox? Yeah. This is our old one, right? Our new one. All right. So I will do attach to running. Yes, by, so now it popped up, right? So let's see which one is Power Automate. I think this is it. Manage your flows. Hopefully that's it. And then let's say just want to close. And if we run this, it's going to open that one. But obviously we want to run the Invoicely because that's what we want to automate. So I am going to have Invoicely in here. I have the Invoicely. Okay, let me pause for a second. I'm not keeping track of the time, Jamie. I don't know.
What other thoughts, just general thoughts about WinAutomation and perhaps UI flows do you want to pass on before we stop the recording?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, like I said, I mean, I've been a big fan of WinAutomation, being able to automate, being able to go to specific and add in the middle, right? So it's very, very powerful. The things that you can do, ton of those. I know we didn't get to do all of these. These are called actions. You can do like a function, right? You can also refactor. Let's say you have a repeating thing all the time. You put it on a separate function. You can call it that from multiple places in your main function here. So typical like a programming where you refactor certain thing that is you calling every places. You just move it to the side and then call that in within a function. That's great. You can add control. When you say add control, it's going to ask you it's going to take you to the website and say, hey, which control do you want to add? See how I'm able to pick, right? I'm able to pick and I say, I need, let's say, maybe I want to add this control, invoice. And so when I do that, it's telling me which table element. It's not going to the text value, but the HTML control behind it. That's why it is dependable. It's not going by X and Y coordinate. It's going by HTML. That's why wherever you move that later on, let's say you move it to somewhere else, you can do it. And again, I'm using mouse, but like you said, it says right there, left click to select control. So all of those are right there. It tells you right on your face, like, hey, you got to do this. Even then I was still hitting my mouse because that's what I'm used to, right? So, and then once you add it, then it goes back to definitely here. And I can do multiple things in here before I get to my report. And all of those will play back. So let's say control, hold on, let me see it again. But okay, so that's one. Other one is WinAutomation does have Academy, where you can go. It's a learning site. You can you register and they have ton of things that you can learn from. Yeah, at a high level, that's what it is.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really appreciate it, Uday.
No
Anybody else?
Sorry, it didn't go the way I wanted to. Just hiccups here and there, but I think kind of got a lot of the things that I was able to show. Just a couple of demos that I couldn't do end to end.
We've all been there.
Yeah,
Thanks.
don't worry, man.
Thank you to everyone who stayed on the call. Really appreciate it.
And thank you to Uday, because there's some things that he mentioned or shown. Some of us have never seen. I for one, I've never cracked it open. So thank you for the introduction to at least see what it looks like on the back,
sure,
on our front end, and know how to use it.
Sure.
So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate that.